the business. Okay, so I wanted to study Parshat Noach together. So I wanted to just look at the opening lines and then delve
We
into
really
a
should start at
commentary.
the beginning.
I know, but we missed Bereshit, so I know. But we're in Parshat Noach. I didn't want to go back. Yeah, so just want to do a screen share. Does anyone want? Well, I'll just read the opening verses, then we'll sort of get to our thing. Let me find where we are. Okay, here we go. Okay, good old Sepharia. Parshat Noach. Right. Ela toldot Noach. This is the line of Noach. Noach ish tzadik. Tamim haya bedorotav. Et Elohim hitalech Noach. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. That's really all I want to look at.
I already have a question.
We're gonna break down this verse for the next 45 minutes.
I mean, my question, it doesn't go past the second word, actually. There is another parsha by the name of Toldot later. Why did they decide that this is Noach rather than Toldot?
As opposed to the other one.
Right.
That's a good question. Actually, this one should be Toldot and the other one should be different because this is the first time it's called that. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
I'll tell you one reason.
The general rule is you use the first non-normal word. So Toldot would be the first thing. So obviously they already knew that they were going to call the other one Toldot, or they felt that Noach was more important than Toldot for some reason.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I'll give you a couple of other answers. Which is, if you know sort of where this is in the place in the Torah, right before it is all the begats and the begats and the begats. And there's a lot of like generation stuff and who's giving birth to who. And this sort of falls in the scheme of that. And actually this phrase Ela Toldot appears multiple times within a couple of columns of the Torah here in this part of it. So I think it's because it's in the midst of a lot of family genealogy, and that this phrase Ela Toldot appears multiple times in this section. So Noach distinguishes it. Noach makes a difference here because it's specifically about the Toldot of Noach, whereas later in Genesis, and actually our parsha called Toldot, there isn't like other places, it's not a lot of other of the begatting and a lot of the other genealogy, if that makes sense. That's my 1 foot answer for you, but it's a good question. So I'm more focused on this phrase, right? Noah was a righteous person. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. And we're going to break down our commentary based on this. If you might know, right, there are pages and pages and pages written on this.
Yes, because how conditional it is. He was blameless in his age. Like at that time must have been a very corrupt time.
Yes, exactly. So I want to look at a commentary, and I'm going to show you a resource that I use that I've actually I don't think I've shown you before, that I find really helpful and is really good, especially with Parsha things. Let me find it. Okay. It's this website called Yeshivat Etzion, Torah Etzion, and they always give really interesting commentaries. So I'm just trying to see if I can find a better printed version. Okay, let me just make a PDF. Oh, that's okay. We'll just do this version. It's okay. Okay, so this is a commentary by Rav David Silverberg, and wanted to sort of make my way through this. Anyone want to help me read?
Sure.
Okay, so interestingly, I'm going to sort of do a little narrating if that's okay. Interestingly, right, so really the question is, how righteous a person was Noah, right? I mean, do we think Noah was pretty righteous? The Torah calls him righteous, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of reference points.
Right? The Torah calls him, right? Did you say we do not have a lot
Do
of
not.
reference? But
Well, later on, I think in the parsha, it describes the morals of his generation is pretty bad. But in
right,
this, you're focusing on this one verse. He's
right. So
making a
actually,
statement without any context.
right. So it's actually the thing that immediately precedes the parsha, this parsha. So it's like the closing words of Bereshit is the world is full of Hamas, right? Of violence, and the people are all evil. And that's sort of the ending of Parshat Bereshit. And then we get this line. The opposition is, the contrast is Noach ish tzaddik. He was a righteous person, right? Blameless in his age. So if you know, like the classic discussion, and there's actually an entire entire page of Talmud, where two rabbis, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, debate like how righteous Noah was, right? What's the question? Like, why would we even question his righteousness?
Because
What leads us to question it?
because of that conditional phrase in
Okay,
his
take out the
age.
conditional phrase, just what happens in the story. Does anything happen in the story that would make us question his righteousness?
Well, he doesn't try to save anyone else.
Right. So number one is it isn't clearly stated. Now remember, the Torah is concise, right? The Torah doesn't tell us everything, right? The Midrash allows us to sort of read between the lines. So the Torah never says that Noah did anything to help his neighbors, warn his neighbors, right? Change society, right? None of those things happen, right? So this is our way of questioning, how truly righteous was Noah? Anything else sort of stick out with this question of how righteous was he?
Well, the only ones he tried to save were his own family, his
Well,
immediate family.
and of course all the animals, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Did he question whether he should be building the ark or why he's being asked to do that? I don't remember. Did he ever question anything?
No,
Just did it, right?
no. In fact, right, if we read the opening line of this commentary from Rav Silverberg from Yeshivat Etzion, he's going to say, which is true, Noah does not speak at all until after the flood, when he comes out of the ark. And there he talks to his children. He blesses them and does a little cursing of them. Noah never speaks at all. What does Noah do? He follows God's instructions and he builds an ark. That's it. Doesn't speak. Right? So there's a question like, maybe he could have spoken, right? Maybe he could have spoken up.
If you were building an ark in your backyard, somebody might come over and say, hey, what are you doing? And even if he might have been asked, he didn't answer. He didn't tell anybody what he was doing.
Like that movie, Evan Almighty.
Yeah.
I think there's a movie way before that in the '60s called The Bible, and I believe there was some banter. I think he was questioned as to why he was doing it and talked to them.
Right.
That, of course, that's a fictionalization, but
yeah,
I sort of remember that.
Noah never speak. I mean, wouldn't you think, like, if I just asked you, like, does Noah say anything before?
No.
You probably, I don't know, maybe you would have thought he did, right?
When God told him to build the ark because he was going to destroy the world, he realized that all his ancestors were going to die. So he was traumatized. So he didn't talk. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, so I'll read you the quote. I won't show you, but this is what it says. God says to Noah, I've decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness, and because of them, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of wood. Make an ark with compartments. Cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it, right? The length, 300 cubits. 50 cubits by 30 cubits, make an opening for light in the ark, put the entrance on its side, make its bottom. Period. Right? Right? I will make a covenant with you when you enter your wife with your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives. Right? That's it. Noah did so. That's what the Torah's answer is. Vaya'as Noach. Kechol asher tziva oto Elohim kein asa. Noah did so just as God commanded him, and so he did. No discussion. No, if it was Abraham, what would Abraham have done? Maybe
He would have negotiated.
negotiated, argued, perhaps, right? Perhaps, right? What story would that parallel? Right, Sodom and Gomorrah. Right. So it's
But
interesting
on the other
here.
hand, you said perhaps he didn't argue about the Akedah.
Exactly. That's why I said perhaps. Yeah.
Or about Ishmael.
That's why I said perhaps, right? That's why I said perhaps, right? So, right, the question is, number one, like, why doesn't Noah speak until now, right? And then when why does he only speak at the end? Does he interact with anybody, right? There's no statement of interaction here. So I'm sort of going to take you through the commentary. So, right, what this rabbi asked is, it raises an issue of what was Noah's relationship with his contemporaries. Did any subsequent dialogue take place between the two sides that just the Torah didn't record? Did Noah make any effort to bridge the moral gap and establish communication between these different peoples? Right? It's a question. It's a question. And is that sort of something that we're supposed to do? Jackie, I muted you because I was getting feedback. I have a question. Take a look at our society and our world right now. If people have a problem with sort of what they feel is something wrong in society, how do most people respond?
They pick up guns.
Oh, right. So then maybe it's some violent thing, right, Ruth? Yeah, what, Lynn?
Well, there is violence. There also in this day and age, a lot of people turn to different social media.
Okay, so they're expressing outrage or something on social media, perhaps?
Yeah, it used to be a letter. You wrote a letter to the editor. Now it's a letter to the world on social media.
Okay, so some like declaration, right? Some declaration, okay. And what does Noah do?
He at least saves the animals.
Okay.
And his family, because God tells him everybody else is awful, and I'm going to end their lives.
Does Noah try to educate?
We don't know.
Does Noah try to provide inspirational leadership?
Only for his family.
Does he provide guidance? Right, these are just questions, right? So what the commentary that we're going to look at, and I'm sort of guiding you through without looking, right, says is, right, Noah takes an isolationist approach, right? Noah's response is to hole himself up, literally, right, in an ark. I'm not saying like following God's command or not, right? I'm sort of pulling that out, right? Right? His response was to isolate himself, right? Why did he do that? Perhaps, tell me if you agree with me, to resist the pressure posed by a humanity that was corrupt and evil and wicked. He built up walls to protect himself, to maintain his moral high ground by separating himself out. Would you agree? Okay, right. So of course, our question in the end is going to be, was he right? Could he have done better? Right? And in our world today, right, where there are questions of divisiveness, lawlessness, right? We feel like maybe morality is a bit askew, right? Right? Should our response be to build up walls, hold ourselves up in our moral high ground, or to go out to be an inspirational leader, to build bridges, to educate, to be more actively engaged in society and not just sort of protect our own?
Well, we were asking the same questions about the Holocaust and the position of the US government at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't
Instead
get a
of
chance.
standing,
I didn't get a chance to watch that PBS documentary from
it's
Ken Burns yet.
excellent. It's excellent.
Yeah, I will tell you, I have not seen it. I've heard, number one, I've heard it's excellent. I did hear a podcast where he was interviewed, and that was excellent. There are rabbinic colleagues of mine, I'm on all these different, listservs and whatever groups that actually they feel like that Ken Burns didn't hold the U.S. government accountable enough in the document. I didn't see the documentary, so I don't know yet. It was right. It came out like the week before Rosh Hashanah, so.
It's there. He didn't use a sledgehammer, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. That also could be something, and now I'll plug the Weingold scholar that we're bringing in 2 weeks, Dr. Porwancher, who is a student of American democracy, American legal, and also Jewish studies. He wrote the book on Was Alexander Hamilton Jewish? But he also is going to be speaking about Teddy Roosevelt and his policies towards the Jews, and we can ask him, if he saw the documentary and what his thoughts were on the representation of Roosevelt and the State Department and the U.S.'s response during the Shoah. That's a sidebar. Okay, getting back to this. Okay, so right, was Noah isolationist? Was it necessary? Now I'll sort of turn it right. What did the situation demand himself to isolate himself? That was the only way for any remnant of morality and humanity to survive, right? Was God's specific instruction to him to build an ark, right, really necessary? There was no way that he could sort of change the tidal wave of immorality in the world. And he recognized that, and he recognized that even if he engaged, that he would be caught up, that it would be ineffective. Is that possible? Could that be a reason and a sort of support for Noah's, let's say, inaction of sort of being more public about what was wrong with the world? What do you think?
Well, when you think what happened with Jonah,
Mm-hmm.
he was afraid at first. He didn't want to be believed, and he thought that people would make fun of him, and of course in Sodom and Gomorrah they actually threatened people who harbored people.
100%. Yeah, that again, right. 100%. Yes. So now let's look at the commentary. Someone want to be a reader?
Just before you go there, I'm thinking back into the Torah. You made the comment that Noah never spoke until he spoke to his sons after the flood. Mm-hmm. Did anybody talk in the Torah between Cain and Noah?
Well, obviously,
I mean, I can't think of anybody.
Adam and Eve.
I said between Cain. I said between Cain and Noah.
No, those were all the begettings and the begettings.
Yeah, I don't remember there. I mean, well, Babel is Babel before or after Noah?
After.
It's after Noah. Okay. I have this, they're both in the same parsha. I have this thing about not remembering which is first.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there definitely was speech. Yeah. There definitely was speech.
No, I know they had the ability to speak. I'm asking if there was any conversation in the Torah is what I was asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone want to be a reader?
I'll read.
Thank you. Okay. Let me figure out where we are.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. All right, if you want to read, starting with the quote, Noah.
Okay. Noah walked with God. He attached himself to him, and all his ways were for his name. This entailed immense intellectual power as he overcame his natural tendencies, for he lived in a generation of sinners and thieves, yet he did not learn from their ways. He rather isolated himself for the service of God.
Right, so this is putting the isolationist of Noah as a positive, right? If he didn't do this, right, his natural tendency would have actually been to go and be with all the other sinners, right? Because that's what everybody else in the world was doing, right? It took extreme, focus in order to, what does the phrase mean, to walk with God? He attached himself to God so that he would separate himself and not learn from those ways, right? So this is it's a positive statement. What does it mean to walk with God? Right? And if you look at this phrase, if you can read the sentence according to where my cursor is.
According to his reading, Noah walked with God signifies that he did not walk with anyone else. He maintained complete disassociation from his contemporaries and seemed to have denied himself any social or cultural interaction with those around him.
Now, do you know anyone else in the Torah who it says walked with God? I'll tell you.
Enoch?
Yeah, Enoch, there's two, right? Enoch, which we understood they actually sort of went to heaven, and Enoch's considered one of the gatekeepers of heaven. Sort of like an Elijah moment that he sort of poofed and went to heaven and is immortal. Abraham is the other one, right? Abraham, it says, walk not with me, but Abraham walks lefanai, before me, right? So now they're going to make a connection between, is there a difference between walking with God as opposed to walking before God? Why does it say for Abraham before God, Noah with God? So if you want to start reading, we're going to sort of cut the chase.
Okay.
Here, similarly, if you see my cursor.
Yes. Similarly, the patriarch Abraham walked before God. He followed the divine path with confident and firm independence, a spiritual maturity that allowed him to interact fully with his theological adversaries in the hope of yielding some positive influence upon them. Noah, by contrast, walked with God, maintaining intense and direct contact with the divine so as to shield himself from the corrosive cultural winds of his time.
Okay, and then I'm going to jump you down here as the Zohar explains.
As the Zohar explicitly describes, when Noah was born, he saw the behavior of the people who sinned before the Almighty. He hid himself so as not to follow their ways, and he occupied himself in the service of his Creator.
All right, what do you think? Are they making too much of the difference between the word before as opposed to walk with God, right? They're saying Abraham walked before God and showed that he had an independence, that he didn't have to be tied directly to God. He could interact with those around him and try to influence them, right? And try to inspire them to make better choices. As opposed to Noah, when he walked with God, it was sort of like he held, we didn't read this, but it talks about him holding God's hand and never letting go. He could never let go. He needed to hold God's hand forever. And if he let go for a second, he would be sort of sucked into depravity. Right. So still the question that begs that we're not answering is, did Noah and Abraham live in a different time where Noah, like just the sin and the evil and the corruption and the morality was so immense that like any second you sort of like were sucked up into it, whereas where Abraham was the world a different place, or were they different people inside? One was a little bit stronger of will and focus. Do you sort of see that difference in the question? Maybe.
I'm thinking.
Okay. So we're gonna jump ahead if that's okay. Let me sort of see where we're at. Okay. So we're gonna go to the question is, where are we? Okay. Was Noah wrong? Where is it? Oh, where is it? I thought I saw it. Okay. Noah was wrong. Okay. There we go. All right, Lynn, you want to read?
Sure. The Midrash Rabbah, towards the end of Sefer Devarim, records a debate between Moshe and Noach as to who was more virtuous. Noach pointed to his having singly escaped the decree of the flood as testament to his piety. Moshe responded that unlike Noah, he had prayed on behalf of those upon whom God decreed destruction. After the sin of the golden calf, Moshe courageously intercedes on his nation's behalf, rejecting the Almighty's offer to make him from a new nation after the destruction of the Israelite people. Noach, by contrast, responded to the decree of the flood with a deafening silence.
And then we're going to jump and just read this according
to the Midrash and Zohar, then we need not search for legitimate reasons behind Noah's isolation. He should have involved himself. He should have left his ark to lend much needed guidance and inspiration to his delinquent brethren.
Okay, we're going to stop here for a second. So now it's not just a comparison of Noah and Abraham. Now it's a comparison of Noah and Moses, right? Again, Moses didn't hold himself up, except when God told Moses to go on top of Mount Sinai. So there were periods of isolation, right, to sort of better the people. But Moses, right, asked for God to, forgive the people, not destroy all the people. By the way, Abraham did the same with Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Right, a little different scenarios, but the same. They both realized that yes, nobody's perfect. The people made mistakes. There is depravity, right? There is sin. There is immorality. But does that mean that everyone needs to be destroyed? Right? Moses prayed to God, sought to change the ways of God. Right? Abraham begged God, right, to find me 10 righteous people. Right?
And you say that about Moshe. In his third part of his life, he did that stuff. But in the second third of his life, he ran off to Midian and didn't do anything.
He learned. How old was Noah when the flood happened? 500,
I think, or 600?
600 years old. Yeah, he was young. 600 years old.
A kid.
He's a boy chick. Yeah. Yeah, no, right. You're right, Ron. Right. Obviously, we learn many different lessons here, right? And that is later. And Moses learned. Moses came, right? Moses, this ideal of a growing leader. So thank you for that. Okay. All right. So now we're going to actually go back and see an interesting comparison with the Sodom and Gomorrah episode, which is a lost cause. Others have justified Noah's seclusion on the basis that no hope existed for repentance on the part of his generation. And this is actually a commentary from both Rav Soloveitchik and Rabbeinu Bachya. Lynn, you want to read similarly?
Similarly, Rabbeinu
Bachia.
Achia bases Noah's refusal to pray on his generation's behalf on the absence of the minimum 10 righteous citizens necessary to spare the world community. In 2 weeks, we will read of Abraham's petition for the annulment of the decree of destruction against the iniquitous city of Sodom. Abraham secured God's promise to save the city should he find 10 worthy residents. He does not, however, seek a pardon in the merit of a lower number of pious inhabitants in Sodom. Rabbeinu Bechaya. Bachia, what? They put an E there.
I don't know. I don't know
Bachia.
how they spell it that way, but it's Bachia.
Bachia thus concludes that 10 righteous people must be present to allow for a pardon of widespread corruption. As Noah's generation failed to meet even this minimal standard, Noah justifiably despaired and exerted no effort on behalf of his contemporaries.
It's interesting. Like I'm not sure. Like I really believe this, to be honest, but I thought it was interesting, right? That the rabbis sort of, again, they compare the situations and they say here, like, Gunug, it would never happen, right? And that this idea exists like in the world, right? That Abraham didn't come up with this idea, or it's like some widespread idea that people knew, right? That God would save the world if there were 10 righteous people, right? Just interesting. Okay, now we're going to shift. So what this sort of
or maybe they thought 50 was the number because it hadn't been bargained down to 10 yet.
That's true. Yeah, it didn't happen yet. Although, right, Rashi always says "En mukdam en muchar b'Torah," right? There's no beginning and no end. Everything there's no linearity in the Torah. There's nothing linear. What's early could be late, and what's late could be early.
And to emphasize that, if you go back to Genesis 7:2, where it talks about the pure animals, we don't know what the pure animals are yet. But here we are,
exactly
seven pairs of pure animals.
Exactly right. So again, there's no right. I'll give you the academics view on that if you know that one, right? The documentary hypothesis, source criticism thing, whatever, right? That this is one of the other sources that were later woven together into the Torah to make it whole. And if you remember, years ago we brought in Dr. Richard Elliott Friedman, who wrote the Bible, one of my favorite books on the Torah and sort of how our Torah came to be. In particular, he takes Parshat Noach, and if you remember, you can actually take the entire story of the flood and you can divide out. There's 2 complete stories in there. There's so much repetition there that you can divide them out, and there's two complete stories, depending on how many pairs of animals there are. How many birds are sent out at the end? There's 2. There's a raven first, and then a dove. And there's a repetition of the measurements and different things, and the use of God's name as Elohim and Adonai. You can sort of separate any verse that has Adonai goes in one column, any verse that has Elohim in another. The part about the raven goes in one column, the part about the dove in another column, the 7 pairs of animals in one column, 1 pair of animal in another column, and you actually have 2 completely different parallel, almost 99% the same flood stories that then, again, this is Richard Elliott Friedman's, thesis, that an editor wove them together. And that's the version we have, is like an interwoven story that combines the 2.
Yeah, I mean, Bereshit has the same thing with the 2 creation stories, although it's more separated. It's not woven together as much.
Again, right, 2 different, right, and there's all different ways of interpreting and understanding those. Okay, so now to shift over, the next question is, maybe Noah didn't speak up because he knew, he was self-aware that he was of insufficient character strength, right? He knew he was a person that would not be capable of making any change, right? He knew it didn't have enough inner toughness. He didn't have chutzpah, right? He knew he lacked that ability to stand up and to turn the tide of what was happening, right? He lacked the pedagogic skills and the power of persuasion necessary to confront his adversaries. And therefore, in defense of himself, right, the only way that he could save the world was to sort of hole himself up. What do you think? Yeah, Sherry, what do you think about that?
I have to come down on Noah's side because I don't think I would have had the nerve to argue with God.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the question. Not just argue with God, right? They're also saying didn't argue with the world,
Right.
right?
Oh,
Right. So it's not just, right, it's a two-pronged thing, right? Number one is arguing with God that, right, you shouldn't destroy the world, you shouldn't destroy humanity. Number two, it's, we see that Abraham also did the same. Abraham was an exemplar for how to live in the world, and people gravitated to Abraham and Sarah through their kindness and their belief in monotheism, right? And they sort of had a gathering, a following of people that sort of came to them, that followed them, right? Noah, this said, right? Noah had a recognition he wasn't that type of inspirational leader. He wasn't someone that was going to get up, post on social media, take the attacks that will come to him, right? He didn't have strong enough of a backbone and a support system where he could rail against the trend of immorality and corruption and stand up and say, you are wrong. This is wrong, right? Our world is going to be destroyed. You need to, right? I'm doing something. You need to do something too, right? Who's capable of doing that? Right, as you said, Sherry, would you be capable of doing that? Right, and maybe this is a recognition, right, that actually this is a positive quality of Noah, right? If he actually did do those things, he probably would have been eaten alive. He wouldn't have made the ark, and humanity may not have survived, right?
and there's also a question if how deep was his belief in God? Why did he wait until he's sure that the flood was behind him before he said, yeah, that was a great job, God. I thought you did real well. But he didn't say anything until he knew he was clear of danger.
Yeah, and actually, right. Also, God puts him in the ark, right? There's all different ways of understanding it, right? That God is the one who puts him in the ark, and God closes up the ark. Noah didn't. Again, there's multiple readings on this, right? One is a hesitancy, right? One was he ready, right? One is, that God sort of takes care of everything, right? There's all different questions here. Let me ask another question. At the end of the story, when he leaves the ark after the flood, when they're on dry land, what is the first thing that Noah does? Do you know? Oh, we're seeing some artwork. Thanks, Jackie. What is the first thing that Noah does? Okay, Lynn, you're going to read it for us. Okay, ready?
Okay,
We're not going to.
He planted a vineyard.
Yeah, we're going to get there. You got it. Okay, we're going to read this is like in the translation, in the commentary, but okay. Right.
to substantiate that line.
You got it. So now what Rav Silverberg is suggesting is that Noah thrived on the sort of the isolationism, right? Noah actually was built to be sort of to hold fast to his tradition in a time where everyone else was being evil, and that like he was like made for that moment. So the question is, once all the evil and the immoral people were dead, they were gone, right? What type of person was Noah going to be afterwards? Some people sort of like adversity brings out the best in them. Those types of people, right? They work best under pressure. But then the question is like, there's no more adversity, right? It's over, right? Now it's just Noah, right? The question is he going to be the same type of person post-flood? Okay, go ahead.
To substantiate this thesis, we need only to observe Noah after the flood, when he no longer confronted evil. Upon emerging from the ark, Noah embarks on an agricultural enterprise, specifically the planting of a vineyard. His choice of fruit with which to begin the renewed cultivation of the earth results in his embarrassing intoxication. Many midrashim and commentators criticize Noah for initiating the world's rehabilitation specifically with grapes rather than other fruits or grains. Indeed, we can only wonder about the righteous, wholesome man who now lies undressed in the presence of his son in a drunken stupor.
Right. So it's a righteous person, right?
Yeah.
Righteous in his generation. Right. This is again this thesis now that Rav Silberberg is suggesting, which is right in the moment when things were so adverse, Noah stepped up, isolated himself, steeled himself in his moral commitment to Hashem, right, and the highest values, right, and in the ark taking care of all the animals. But now that the flood's over, and he's the only person here, there's no more adversity, right? Now we see a different side of Noah, right? A different type of person. And just to add to it, if you can read from here, Lynn, the Midrash.
The Midrash similarly notes the Torah's reference to Noah here as an Ish Adama, a man of the land. Material pursuits and physical gratification became his defining characteristics. Rather than simply engaging in the cultivation of the land, Noah assumed an essentially mundane identity.
Asa atzmo chulin.
He made himself mundane.
All right, what do you guys think? You think they're onto something here?
Well, he had nothing to compare himself with at that point, since he was the only one. But even his daughters were not blameless either.
100%.
The whole family. They didn't have an innate morality. They had morality that was imposed by the comparison of what was around them. Having nothing else around them, they did whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah. So I'll just read you a little bit more of that commentary. If indeed external pressure provided Noah his religious resolve, then we more fully understand as having found refuge in the isolationist ark. Noah's entire religious persona developed out of resistance to his contemporaries. External factors often contribute to one's decision to adopt a principled lifestyle. Once Noah left the confines of the ark, he could not maintain those same standards of righteousness or virtue any longer. What do you think? Sound like a possibility?
Yeah.
It was PTSD.
Yeah. I agree.
Or survivor's guilt, maybe.
That could be it too. 100%. 100%. So before we, if anyone wants, I can send you the full, let me put in the chat the full thing if anyone's interested in reading it in the chat. And then I wanted to close with one last commentary. I highly recommend, it's a great website for a lot of different resources. I highly recommend it. So if I can shift for a second, and that is, I wanted to just share one final sort of closing thought on the Parsha from a different rabbi and commentator. Not sure how much you've studied a rabbi known as Mei Hashiloach, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Leiner. He was known as the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and he lived in the 1800s. And he was from Izbica or Ishbitz in Poland. And I think my parents who are on there usually call on user one. My father's family was from Ishbitz. In fact, his mother, my grandmother, my bubby, was born in Ishbitz before she came over at the age of 6 to America, and so we have a true connection to the Ishbitzer Rebbe. I don't think we're related, but perhaps he was the rabbi of our family for many generations and many years. And the Ishbitzer Rebbe is often studied. In his work, again, is called Mei HaShiloach, and he gives this commentary on Noah's Ark. So obviously, we said that the command, that when God speaks to Noah, right? No, God says to Noah, build an ark. But the Hebrew there, it says, Aseh Lacha Teva. Not build an ark, but Aseh Lacha Teva means
Build it for yourself
an ark. So there's an idea that each of us can build ourselves an ark. So what does that mean? Like, we're not going out and getting, cubits and cubits, we're not getting, 40 feet pieces of lumber and 2x4s and going out and building ourselves an ark. Although I did take down the sukkah yesterday, and our sukkah is in our garage at the moment on lots of cubits of wood and other things. But what does that mean? That, right, again, God could have just said, make an ark, not make for yourself an ark. So this is what the Ishbitzer Rebbe teaches about it. The idea is that the ark protected Noah through a period of immense storm and difficulty and adversity. And likewise, we each have both a command, an ability, and opportunity to build for ourselves an ark, right? What does that mean? It means that we have the ability to create a space so that we can be protected and that we can survive whatever adversity, whatever storms are brewing in our lives, in our world, and that when we're in dire straits, we can turn to that inner ark within ourselves so that we can restore our balance and our mindset. And that's what the Ishbitzer Rebbe is saying, right? Aseh Lacha Teva, build for yourself an ark, is that we have an ark inside of ourselves. It's not that, again, not wood, not hammers, not nails, that we have both within ourselves and within our community. We have the ability to weather any storm, and we do that together.
Compass.
And also a resilience, right? And I think also a resilience, right? And it's faith and it's connection and it's support, and that's something that we should strive to know and to feel and to find. And I think that all of us here have done it in different times. So my closing word from the Ishbitzer Rebbe is Aseh Lacha Teva, know your ark, find your ark, build your ark, and regardless of whatever storms we encounter, we're going to get through it stronger together. Thanks for learning with me, and I'll see you next Monday.
It's a moral compass.
Amen. And again, and that the Teva, the ark, did not have a steering wheel, right?
No.
It didn't, right? It did not have a steering wheel. Maybe
Or GPS.
I like what you say, Jackie, the morals, morality, Torah, kindness, compassion. That was the steering wheel. That was the moral compass. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for learning with me, and I'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.